Jacob knows he's to go back to Bethel eventually. He told God, God has identified himself as like, I'm the God of Bethel. This is where you're going to. That's where his vow to God would take him. That is God's house. It's literally what Bethel means. Let me tell you this. Do not settle in Shechem when you're supposed to be in Bethel. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Now imagine you're Jacob for a second, because I just think this is a funny picture. Jacob has been freaking out about Esau, thinks he's going to die. Like, this is really what he thinks. Even though he's met with God, and God is like, I'm going to bless you. And it's just like, okay. But then imagine the next day he sees the 400 men. He sees this army of men coming towards him, and there's Esau. And then you see just Esau just booking towards Jacob. And what are you thinking if you're Jacob? It's just like, ha, 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 that kind of thing. And we see that Esau just embraces him. And there's weeping. And you're like, oh, they're brothers. They love each other. And it's this beautiful moment. So all this preparation was for naught. All this freaking out, all this worry, all this anxiety ends up being for naught. Jacob was going to the place where God sent him, where God was preparing the way for him. And remember, he gave him angels to greet him as he entered back into the promised land. All of that for nothing. Jesus says it best. He always does in Luke 12:25. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? How much of your time do you spend worrying about what you cannot control? How much time do we spend worrying about the things we can control? Probably a lot more than we should. I am at so much peace when I just surrender it to God. I'm just like, God, I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but I'm gonna do it the way you've commanded to do it. I'm going to love God with all my heart. I'm going to love people. I'm going to make disciples. If we make that a part of everything we do, and we surrender it to God, and we just say, all right, I'm just going to work hard and then just trust you. And I'm not going to do it in my own strength. I'm going to do it in the strength that you provide in your Holy Spirit. That worry just goes away. That worry cannot exist. Luke 12:27, consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the I don't know what's happening today. God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire. How much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it, for the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Remember this passage here. The pagan world runs after all these things, what we're going to eat, what we're going to drink, what will tomorrow bring, and how can we get as much of it as we possibly can. That's what the world thinks. But Jesus says, seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. As long as Jacob was on the covenant path, even though he was tricked by Laban, even though he had to toil and work very hard, God just continued to pour out blessings upon him and make a way. It is very clear. Jesus is very clear. Do not worry. Seek God's kingdom and trust that he will supply your needs according to his riches and glory. I don't want to gloss over that command, though. Seek his kingdom. That means keep learning about who he is. Keep growing in him. Keep obeying his commands. Seeking his kingdom does not just mean showing up at church once a week and being a good person. It means showing yourself to be a worker approved at your job. It means putting bread on the table for your family. It means discipling your kids and anyone around you who wants to know more. It means loving your neighbor as yourself. Do those things while submitting to His will for your life, and then trust Him to follow through, because He always does. He always does. It's only when we walk off the covenant path that we're going to struggle and worry and let fear abound in our lives. As Jacob has shown us, you can worry on the path to covenant. You're just not supposed to. Jesus said, do not worry. Genesis 33, verse 5. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children. Who are these with you? He asked. Jacob answered, they are the children of God has graciously given your servant. Then the female servants and their children approached and bowed down. Next, Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all came Joseph and Rachel, and they too bowed down. Esau asked, what's the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met? To find favor in your eyes, my lord, he said. But Esau said, I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. No, please, said Jacob, if I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably. Please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need. And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. Then Esau said, let us be on our way, I'll accompany you. So Esau has this thing of, we're going to go together. We're going to go the rest of the way together, and we're going to settle together. Verse 13, but Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are tender, and that I must care for the ewes and cows that are nursing their young. If they are driven hard just one day, all the animals will die. So let my Lord go on ahead of his servant, while I move along slowly at the pace of the flocks and herds before me, and the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir. Esau said, then let me leave some of my men with you. But why do that? Jacob asked. Just let me find favor in the eyes of my Lord. So that day Esau started on his way back to Seir. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth. After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver, he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El-Hohi, Israel. So Jacob here does not let himself be tied to Esau. He doesn't go where Esau is. Jacob knows he's supposed to go back to the promised land, specifically to Bethel. That's what Jacob vowed to God over 20 years ago. That was the covenant Jacob made. You get me to Paddan Aram, God, and then you bring me back safely to my father's house and to this stone that I used as a pillow, and you'll be my God. Bethel is a special place for Jacob and God, with God using it as an identifier for Jacob in Genesis 31:13, where he said, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Bethel is the place where God showed Jacob the ladder to heaven that would connect earth and heaven through Jesus Christ. So there's this pull back there. He knows that this is where he's going to end up. Now here's what we know geographically. Jacob has brought his family a long way. If you recall, when we're talking about going to Paddan Aram, this is a 900-mile journey on a well-worn path. If you were going the long way but safe way, if you went through hill country, if you just went straight, it was half that. Still a very long, treacherous way, especially on foot. So whichever way they came, And since they had children and livestock, we're assuming this probably took them the 900-mile route. Took them a long time to get there. They get to the promised land. They make a pit stop at Succoth, where he builds a place. And it seems like he's putting down roots. But then he pulls up stakes and he makes his way to Shechem, and it says he settles there. Shechem is 30 miles north of Jerusalem. Shechem is the place where God initially met Abraham when he got to the promised land and affirmed that he would make Abraham a great nation. So this place is special to God and Abraham, but it is not where his father's Isaac, it's not where Isaac's house is. And it's not Jacob's meeting place with God. That's Bethel. Bethel is 15 miles south of Shechem. He's come probably 900 miles. You can appreciate a newer feel for the middle of nowhere because you pass through a whole bunch of it on the way to Orange City. Just, miles and miles and miles of, it's like, there's no city. We're not passing any city for 100 miles. We're out as remote as it possibly can be. That's Bethel versus pick any city. So Jacob knows he's to go back to Bethel eventually. He told God, God has identified himself as like, I'm the God of Bethel. This is where you're going to. That's where his vow to God would take him. That is God's house. It's literally what Bethel means. Let me tell you this. Do not settle in Shechem when you're supposed to be in Bethel. Maybe that doesn't make sense to you just yet, but I'll give you another example from real life before we dig into Genesis 34. When Tracy and I first came to Iowa, we settled in Brooklyn because that's where God had called us to. He had laid Brooklyn on our hearts. We knew this in our bones. We had it confirmed through the Holy Spirit and witnesses. God couldn't have made it any clearer. We came here in 2010, and we knew we're supposed to be involved in ministry in Brooklyn. And what did we do? We went to go get involved in ministry at a church in Montezuma. Now, let me be clear. We got people from Grinnell, from Malcolm, from the surrounding area right here in our church. It's totally okay to go to a church that is outside your town. But God had made it abundantly clear that your ministry is going to be in Brooklyn. And our rationale was we have a strong connection with the church in Montezuma. It's comfortable. We have family ties there. It makes sense. So we're settled in Brooklyn, but let's have our ministry be settled in Montezuma. We then tried to make stuff happen in our own strength, ministry-wise. We really did. We pushed, we gave of ourselves, and we just kept at it. But like I talked about a month ago, when we left the church in Tulsa, I talked about how the favor that we had, where whatever we put our hands to flourished, how that was lifted. And we knew that as anything we put our hand to there was not going to take root anymore. We were called to Brooklyn. We were called to leave and come here. And we thought that was just generally Iowa. Well, as we tried to put our hands to stuff in Montezuma, we found that that is not what happened. What we put our hand to did not flourish. And it just seemed like we were spinning our wheels. Guys, that church in Monty is still alive and vibrant today. It is a good, godly place. God is doing great things there and moving in the hearts and minds of those people. But it wasn't the church that God wanted us to settle in. But again, because in our rationale it made so much sense to, because of ties and history and all that stuff, We tried, and we tried to force it. And at the end of a year there, just a year, we felt burnt out and discouraged, and we were questioning why we came to Iowa in the first place. Guys, that was a long year. In so many ways, we learned to pay attention to the voice of God. When he says go specifically here, he means go specifically here. So after a year, we finally said, we should do something else. Hey, why don't we just check out a church in Brooklyn? Crazy, right? And we step into new beginnings, a church where we didn't know anyone, where they didn't do things in a traditional format in the way that we were used to. And in so many ways, I say this having been here for a long time now, in so many ways, when we walked in, our flesh saw these different things and was just like, ew, no, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't like this. This isn't the way I like it. It's akin to when you have your mom's spaghetti and then you eat someone else's spaghetti and they use a different sauce. What are we talking about? Do you even know what good spaghetti tastes like? Like, that's the kind of thing how we came into this church where we were just like, why? Why? And despite what our flesh said, we got blessed. And we left feeling full and at peace. And my wife and I were in the car. This was just the first time we're in the car sitting out there. We haven't pulled away. And we both look at each other and we both have this thing. It was just like, it's here, isn't it? And it was just instantly like, yeah, it is. Like, we knew right away the confirmation, even though we had no connection, no ties, and it made us in our flesh uncomfortable, but our spirit was like, yes, obviously. Thank you for finally listening to us. This was, in essence, our Bethel, the place that God from Tulsa had led us to. We were serving in the place that he would have us down in Tulsa for a season, and then he brought us specifically to this place. And if it is ever his will, we will go on to wherever he would have us from here. If we're here for the rest of our life, then man, we're not leaving. In this place, as we began to serve, we began to grow spiritually, and we found that favor that God promised. Do not settle in Shechem when you're supposed to go back to Bethel. Let's read this next chapter for understanding. And as always, let it help us know God more. It's going to be difficult to find him in these verses, and you really need the first part of 35 to get it. Genesis 34, verse 1. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father, Hamor, get me this girl as my wife. So right off the bat, this is obviously a terrible thing. This was the norm in pagan cities in Canaan. If you saw a girl and you wanted her, you could take her. And then, after laying with her, if you found her suitable, you could marry her. It is everything wrong with the covenant of marriage that God established between a man and a woman. Verse 5. When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the fields with his livestock, So he did nothing about it till they came home. That's a hard line for a father to read. He did nothing. Jacob waited till his sons came home. Mind you, this land, this city, this is not his people. Jacob is the stranger, the outsider here. And if he goes in there demanding justice, he's not only not going to get it, he is probably going to receive punishment for it. This was the norm. He's demanding he's like, no, this is not right. This is how God said this is to be, and they're not going to care about that. They're not in one accord with him here. But keep in mind also, we know Jacob's history. Jacob was an opportunist, and I know he's thinking things through here. He's not an irrational guy. He's the guy that makes plans and backup plans. At the very least, if we're giving Jacob the full benefit of the doubt here, I think he knows that God will ultimately handle this if given the chance. Verse 6. Then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk with Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields. As soon as they heard what had happened, they were shocked and furious because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift I am about to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman as my wife." So, oh, I did. Yeah, yeah, it's okay. So we skipped. If you're paying attention, good. We skipped. That's okay that we skipped those verses. Absolutely, you can read them though. We want to point out here though that Hamor tells Jacob to go against a very important part of the covenant. As we remember context here, as we call back to, remember Abraham, how he sent Eleazar back to Paddan Aram to find Isaac a bride. And he went so far as to have Eleazar swear on the covenant circumcision, making him swear on that to go and find a bride for Isaac, because he was not to marry a Canaanite woman, because they would not be in line with the things of God. And then remember how upset Rebekah and Isaac were when Esau married a Canaanite woman. And then they sent Jacob to Paddan Aram to find a woman of God to marry, someone outside Canaan. So Shechem is saying, forget all that. Compromise. I'll give you a good deal. Name your price. I'll give you whatever you want. And you can, and we'll bind these two in marriage, and then your sons can also, they can marry anyone else in this land, and we'll all be one big happy family. And we still don't see Jacob's response to this matter. What we see is Jacob's sons telling a lie. I wonder who they learned that from. They just saw their father lie to their uncle, Esau. When Jacob said, "I'll meet you there," and then he doesn't go there. Jacob's kids have learned from the best, which is a reminder, what habits are our children picking up from us? If you raise your voice when you're angry, they'll raise their voice. If you cuss, they'll cuss. If you lie, they'll lie. Your habits can and often do become their habits. Verse 13. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, "We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go." Did you hear how compromising that sounds? We'll all be one happy family. We'll take your daughters for our wives, and you can take Dinah as yours, and it will all be connected. It'll be great. But first, you got to get circumcised. You guys, as delicate a topic as that is, we spent a whole Sunday just preaching on circumcision alone, how big of a deal that is to God, how much of a setting apart that was from the other nations. God was saying, this is the cut, this is the blood, this is the thing that will set apart you and your people and your nation unto myself. And it was actually a thing that God was doing that helped stave off infection for when they would be marching 400 years in the wilderness. God just being outside time and space, looking ahead for a thing that was going to happen, protecting his people. So right now, it's a big deal that they are being deceitful in this, and they're saying, it's just like, yeah, it's fine. We'll totally be okay and make this happen as long as you join in this circumcising covenant that we have going on. Guys, that is, to an extent, that would be like us tricking someone with communion. Okay? That's what's happening here. It'd be like poisoning someone else's communion cup. This is a terrible thing that they're proposing, because they don't mean this in a way that it is in shalom, is in part of God's family. They're using this as a means to weaken them so they can take advantage. Verse 18. Their proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. The young man, who was the most honored of all his father's family, which really saying something given what he did to Dinah, lost no time in doing what they said, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to the men of their city. "These men are friendly toward us," they said. "Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters, and they can marry ours. But the men will agree to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males be circumcised, as they themselves are. Won't their livestock, their property, and all their other animals become ours? So let us agree to their terms, and they will settle among us." So understand by that passage, everyone is just using each other. And their plan is, we'll absorb this wealthy family, and they'll eventually be just like us, not the other way around. Verse 24. All the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. You look at that response and you're like, God, are you okay with that? Are you okay with any of this? What we see is silence. We have not heard God say anything in this passage. It's to let his sons know that he does not approve of what they did, because you put a target on our back now. kid's response is, well, they deserved it. They had it coming. We're good at making messes, aren't we? Hurt people. Evil begetting evil. And we see how fast, like there's a really big takeaway, it's this from this chapter until we just look at the first little part in Genesis 35. A big takeaway is how fast that God's people could have easily become like the nations around them. Compromise happens so fast. And we can justify it every which way. People have come after my family, and I've been like, God, I would like to smite them. But I know it's up to God to judge people, not myself. I have to trust God to move and to act and be smart. Protect your family, protect those around you, but do it in a way that honors God. I absolutely believe God, because we've seen this. We've seen God bring judgment on those around all through Genesis so far. And anybody that would raise a hand against Abraham, against Isaac, and against Jacob, God got a hold of them very quickly. Even all the way up to 2 pharaohs who were just like, oh, sorry, absolutely, big step back. Here, have some blessings as you go. But Jacob's sons took it into their own hands, and then Jacob responds with like, why are you bringing all this trouble upon me? And then God speaks. Every time we should incline our ear. Genesis 35, verse 1. Then God said to Jacob, go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. God tells Jacob plainly, get away from this place that has been compromising you and poisoning you and creating so much hurt for you. It was never the place you were meant to settle. You know where you were supposed to be headed to, yet you chose to settle for a season here. And we're going to see in the context that it was for a little bit, because it had slowly become to creep in. All these little tendrils of compromise, all these little ways that they were being taken away from the heart of God and His will for their life. Let's look at it here in verse 2. So Jacob said to his household and all who were with him, get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had. And he got out the pagan idols. He got out the earrings that were worn by the pagan priests of that day when they sacrificed to idols. And he buried all of them, and he left them behind. And then the presence of God made everyone leave them alone. Look at that verse. It wasn't Levi and Simeon massacring a town. It was the terror of God that made everyone around them give them a wide berth. And guys, I think this is the context that we have. We know when they were in Shechem, they had either come with stuff that they had brought already. We know Rachel had some idols. And we know when they're at Shechem, they must have amassed more. They must have slowly allowed that compromise to come in so that they were vulnerable to attack. This is what happens when, and guys, as long as we're in a fallen world, stuff is going to happen that are beyond our control, but we are always in control of how we respond to it. And we either respond to it in our flesh, doing it our own way, doing it in a way that makes sense to us, and then living with the fallout of whatever that is. And if it's in my flesh, it ain't going to be good. It's going to be hurt begetting hurt, evil begetting evil. But if we surrender it to God and we say, God, I'm so glad you're a big God and that you're in control of this, and I surrender it to you. And I'm going to have to keep surrendering it to you on a daily basis sometimes, because that hurt that was done to me is not a thing I can easily let go on my flesh, but I surrender it to you again and again and again and again. And you watch God move. You watch God part waters. You watch God make your path straight so that you're able to get to Bethel. You're able to get to the place you need to be. But that starts by making sure that you are cleaning house. You are bearing the idols at Shechem, and you are walking on towards Bethel. If you have come from a place of hurt, I ask you to look around. What ways have you allowed compromise to creep into your life? What ways can you resurrender your heart to Him and say, God, I just want to get to the place that you would have me be. I want to get to God's house. I want to get to that place of surrender, that place where I meet you and I see you work. Imagine if they had not allowed compromise to come in, if they hadn't stopped at Shechem but had just continued on to Bethel, a whole lot of mess and hurt would have been avoided. We're not going to get into it today because I've gone pretty long, but don't think that Levi and Simeon get away scot-free here. They don't. If you want to, in your devotional time, read Genesis 49. They get a shout out early on. And we just see, God really deals with them uniquely in their own way. But right now we're finishing Jacob's story as the central character here in verse 6. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. I pray you go to Bethel today, the place that is God's house, the place he has led you to go. Do not settle in Shechem, even if it makes sense, even if it is like, well, this will just be so easy. Go to Bethel, and as you do, rid yourself of compromise. Keep making your path straight. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face towards you and give you peace.